Welcome to the Common Man Football Show. My name is James Coburn, and today's episode, we're talking about college football Week 10, top 25 metric picks. This is, of course, a interesting week of college football. A lot of dominoes fell. We're going to hear a lot more about the College Football Playoff Committee, so that will that will be announced when this video comes out. But lots of stuff to talk about. So getting into this video, and again, if you're new to the channel and you don't really know about data or analytics or any of that stuff when it comes to college football or picks, you can just go to the description, and all definitions and all terms and definitions are there in the description. So you can kind of go there if you're not familiar with what I've done, but it's pretty straightforward about a lot of stuff. But so to recap what happened last week of college football in terms of picks. Did pretty well, by the way. Not as well as I did the previous week. The previous week I went undefeated, 16-0. But this was another very strong week, 13-4 for the week, which is fantastic. I mean, it's fantastic to have this kind of result. And to go into some of the losses, some of the teams that were not hits. Iowa State versus TCU, that was a game in favor of TCU, but I think, based on the data, it was a 6-point difference between those teams, based in terms of team strength and all the other sort of factors. So that was a pretty dang close game. I wouldn't say it's too close to call per se, but that definitely was one of those games where there was a leeway to it, and it was at Iowa State. And this is also a team that's proven to take down. They took down Oklahoma. They have sort of a track record of being able to take down these really top teams. So from that perspective, I don't think there's anything data-wise that would have tipped you off to Iowa State upsetting them 100%, like to make that a safe bet. But I do believe that there was enough data to if you wanted to take the approach of this is a home game, I think there was enough positive things in favor of Iowa State winning that football game from a data perspective. Then, of course, you get Michigan State versus Northwestern. That was another game that was pretty dang even between both those teams in terms of data. I think it was another game that was only about an 8-point to 6-point difference between those two teams. Houston, Florida is really the only big upset. Houston was a 40-plus point team. South Florida was about a 90-plus team overall in terms of most of the data. They were kind of like that. So that was the only sort of true upset. And then, of course, Arizona versus Washington State. A lot of that is just because Arizona State, the data hasn't really caught up to Khalil Tate. Khalil Tate is an amazing weapon for them as a quarterback and as a runner. And he's just kind of changed all the dynamics of that Arizona team. So from that perspective, that's basically what that game was the data hadn't quite caught up to Khalil Tate's impact, because he's definitely been a very impactful player up to this point. But overall, again, 13-4, not bad. Went 16-0 last week. This week, pretty. I definitely think I can improve a couple things here and there to kind of help sway things a certain way. But overall, pretty strong week, all things considered. So getting into Week 10. So getting into the matchups for Week 10, we have Memphis versus Tulsa. This pretty much goes to Memphis. Tulsa hasn't won a lot of football games. The biggest driver for them in terms of losing is their defense. They have a very, very poor defense. And in many ways, they're kind of set up similar to Memphis, in that Memphis has a great offense but a poor defense. And the same thing goes with Tulsa. But Memphis, I just think, will put up more points than Tulsa. So from that perspective, most of the data favors Memphis. So that's really all you really need to know. Michigan State versus Penn State. Penn State pretty heavily favored in this particular game. Michigan State's been one of those teams that's been a bit overrated. Points wise, they've only had 26.11 in terms of the points they've been able to put up this year, which is really low, on top of having fumble issues and all these other sort of issues. So Penn State definitely had a very tough loss this week, against Ohio State, but I do think Penn State will get the win over Michigan State. Then, of course, we get Auburn versus Texas A&M. Auburn pretty heavily favored in this particular game. Texas A&M's defense just is not existent. Indiana versus Wisconsin. Wisconsin is pretty heavily favored in this game against Indiana. Indiana has some flashes of goodness, but I do think they're somewhat overrated in the grand scheme of things because of how they played this year. Then, of course, you get UMass versus Mississippi State. Mississippi State is favored in this particular game. Stanford versus Washington State. This actually goes in favor of Stanford. So this is definitely a game that most of the data kind of favors Stanford. But I do think that Bryce Love, if he does not play in this game, I think that's going to be a big factor to kind of think about. Because Bryce Love, huge part of the success of Stanford this year. And if he's not playing in this game for whatever reason, then I think that could definitely change the dynamics of that. Then, of course, you get Iowa versus Ohio State. Ohio State pretty much favored pretty decently in that particular matchup. Georgia versus South Carolina. Georgia pretty much favored. Clemson versus North Carolina State. This is going to be a fun game to watch and see exactly what happens, but Clemson still heavily favored here. Just a better overall defense, and the offense of North Carolina State is better, but the defense of Clemson is just lights out. Of course, Kelly Bryant is healthy, so this is kind of a no-brainer game. I do like North Carolina State. I think they've been able to sneak up on a lot of teams, but I think in this particular matchup, Clemson just has a much better defense than North Carolina State, and their offense, I think, with Kelly Bryant is just going to, take them up a little bit higher as well. Then, of course, you look at the Notre Dame versus Wake Forest game. Notre Dame pretty much heavily favored in this particular game. Iowa State versus West Virginia. All the data pretty much favors Iowa State in this game. Oklahoma versus Oklahoma State. Maybe the first upset, I don't know. But Oklahoma State's actually favored in this game by 3 points. 85.23 to 88.37 for Oklahoma State. Based on overall team offensive/defensive point data. The data that really matters when it comes to trying to do these projections. And, that's definitely a very close game, but it does favor Oklahoma State. Then, of course, you get Texas versus TCU. TCU pretty much favored in that particular matchup. Central Florida versus SMU. Central Florida favored. Alabama versus LSU. Alabama favored. Miami versus Virginia Tech. Very close game. Virginia Tech favored 98.60 to 93.10 to Florida. So this is definitely a game to keep track of because it could really go either way. Now, one thing I will say about Miami is they do have a better defense in terms of its ability to get turnovers, to get interceptions, to do stuff like that. But this is definitely a game that I would, if I'm Miami, I would be a little bit worried because Virginia Tech does have a pretty decent advantage here. So that's definitely a game to kind of keep track of. Then, of course, you get Oregon versus Washington. Washington pretty much favored in this particular game. And then, of course, Arizona versus USC. And Arizona is favored in this game 68.53 to 67.86. And the emergence of Khalil Tate has really changed the dynamics of this Arizona team. So this is definitely a game where it's very close. But again, as the weeks go on and Khalil Tate continues to do what Khalil Tate's doing, I think that this is just going to fall in line with the Arizona victory here. Despite how close it is, which who knows exactly what happens. USC might still find a way to get it done, but I just think Khalil Tate is that good on film and has really changed the entire landscape of this program this year up to this point. So this is a team that the data has not caught up to him. And because of that, I think all bets are off in terms of trying to figure out exactly what his impact is. Then, of course, we just get to the regular sheet. This has all the wins and losses for the week. If you just want to skip to the end, if you're that type of guy, you just kind of skip to the end and just look at the regular wins and losses. But, yeah, another great week of college football, guys. I'm really excited about a ton of these matches. And in terms of best games, like if you want to watch a particular game that has really close competition, I would say to definitely watch not Washington and the other team, but sorry about this. But Miami Virginia Tech, and Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. So those are the two games where very evenly matched teams, and I think it'll be pretty even on the football field as well. So those would be the top two games that, if you want to watch games that are going to be exciting, and games that you just want to enjoy and not have any money on the line, those definitely would be games to kind of watch and just enjoy for what they are, which are pretty tough matchups. And of course, my name is James Coburn. You can find my other work at draftcoburn.wordpress.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Geometrics. And if you like this content and you want more content like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Share this video as well with anybody that you know, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Peace.